Hi, Tara Kiesling here with Together We Will. I'm here with Yvette Simpson. She's a candidate for Cincinnati mayor. Groups joining us tonight will be Together We Will East Cincinnati, United We Stand, and Indivisible Cincinnati for All. So shout out to all those groups. Please like our Facebook page for notifications for future Q&As. We have an upcoming Q&A with Hamilton County Commissioner Denise Driehaus, where we'll be discussing MSD. So if you've heard about any of the plans for MSD coming up and you live in Hamilton County, this probably affects you in some way. So tune in, ask your questions, even if it's as simple as what is MSD and what do they do. Metropolitan Sewer District, just so you know. You can review recordings of previous Q&A events on our Facebook page and on our YouTube channel. We'll post a link to those in the comment section of this video. You can also follow us on Twitter at TWWSWOH. And to ask a question during the interview, make sure you click on the feed and add your question in the comments, and we'll be asking them live as we go. So now to Yvette. She grew up in Lincoln Heights. She was raised by her grandmother in public housing. She graduated from Princeton High School. And then there will be a long list of degrees here, and it's a very impressive list as well. So she has a BA and a BS from Miami University, go Red Hawks. Her BS is in political science. Her BS is in mass communications. At age 8, she decided she wanted to become a lawyer, and she did just that. She got her JD from Cincinnati College of Law in 2004. She has an MBA degree from Xavier University in 2014. She developed and directed Miami University's first pre-law program. She currently serves as counsel at Ulmer and Byrne LLP. In 2005, Yvette was recognized as one of the Business Courier's 40 Under 40, and she's been honored as one of the YWCA's Career Women of Achievement in 2014. She was elected to City Council in 2011, and she's the chair of Human Services, Youth, and Arts Committee, as well as she serves on the board of the Budget and Finance, Law and Public Safety, Neighborhoods, and Major Transportation Regional Corporation, and those are all separate committees. She's a member of the Hamilton County Regional Planning Commission as appointed by the City Planning Commission. So did I miss anything?
No, just very busy.
Yeah, it sounds very busy.
Like it. I think I share a record with Kevin Flynn of most committees. So I think we share that record.
Cool. Is there anything else that you'd like to add to your bio or in way of intro?
No, I think you got it covered. Thank you.
Cool. We will go ahead and get started with the interview.
All right, wonderful.
So what do you think is the single most pressing issue facing Cincinnati, and how will you address that issue?
So safety is always, I think, a primary issue. But I always think that safety is wrapped into so many other things, right? So safety is wrapped into our neighborhood condition. Safety is wrapped into the condition of people, right? People who are thriving and who are doing well are less susceptible and less likely to get involved in issues where safety is an issue. Neighborhoods that are developed and thriving are neighborhoods that are more safe. So I would say safety is always our number one issue, and I think the way that I approach that is from a multifaceted approach, holistic. So yes, we have to have boots on the ground. We have to have law enforcement that's active and working. We also have to have a great relationship between the community and law enforcement to make sure that crimes are reported and that people feel like our law enforcement works for them and not against them. We also have to have strategies to help people make good choices, right, and have options to make good choices. And then we've been leaning into this violence prevention work, which says that, you know, crime doesn't happen in a vacuum, that people who are exposed to violence are more likely to repeat it. So treating the trauma that comes from overexposure to violence that usually starts at a young age, but can happen in adults as well. So that PTSD that can set in when people are overexposed to violence actually leads to the repeating of that violence, either in the perpetration of violence or the victimization of violence. So we've been doing that work, and I think a safe community is a healthy community, a safe community is a thriving community, and people in the city of Cincinnati would say that's probably the number one issue facing our city.
What do you see as the strengths and weaknesses of Cincinnati, and how will you improve the weak points?
Cincinnati has a lot of great assets. I mean, I think when you think about a city our size that has a lower cost of living, lots of amenities, great educational institutions, arts and culture, sporting teams, although this year a little mixed bag, but we've had some great years too. You know, we've got, you know, a lot of great people who really care very much about our city and are investing in the future of our city. Our major challenges are, you know, we're one of the most segregated cities, and we're fifth in the nation, I think, for most segregated cities, and that's a challenge. Our poverty rate is very, very high, and I think that's in part based on the disparity that exists within our communities for sure. We also, you know, I think we have to figure out a way, I think, to learn to love our city and know that our city can be greater. And for a long time, it wasn't really popular to love Cincinnati. It was actually much more popular to think that Cincinnati wasn't a great city. And, you know, I'm really excited about the fact that people are really, like, proud of our city, and we have to do more of that, too. So, you know, we've got some great strong points, some real challenges. We didn't invest in our city for a very, very long time because people were leaving cities to go to the suburbs. And because of that, we've got a lot of housing stock and neighborhoods that need to be reinvested. That's another major challenge for our city, and I think something that we need to look at. On the good side, Cincinnati has a great historic footprint, a lot of great historic housing, and I think that's something that is distinctive to us, something that we should celebrate. We have some great companies here, very large companies. We also have a burgeoning small business and startup population here that's starting, which is really great. I think the number one value in our city is the people. We got amazing people who really care about each other, people who are deeply connected one to another. I call my city my family and my home, and it is that. A lot of people, when they come here, whether they come here, they grew up here, they come here remotely, we say we've adopted you into our city, and so our greatest asset is certainly the people.
Yeah, it really does feel like a city where you can know everybody, especially the more you're out and about doing things. You just
absolutely
see people everywhere that you know.
Yeah. 1 degree of separation, I think they say, between Cincinnatians. And it might be less than that. It might be like half a degree. So,
where would you like to see Cincinnati in 10 years?
I want us to be the #1 urban city in the country. And people say, Yvette, how can you have such a bold vision? Well, clearly my life experience shows that I believe in having big dreams and seeing those things through. We can be the #1 urban city because of all the things that I talked about, right? To have a city that's the perfect size as we are, that has amenities like we do, if we can continue to grow our city in a way that we have and be aggressive in that growth, and we learn to allow and assist people in going along with us in that growth, meaning we rise together, I think we're going to have the best urban city in the country. And that's going to take a lot of investment. It's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of us working together and rowing in the same direction to make that happen. But I think now cities our size are very attractive. And if we work really, really hard on those issues that are major challenges, that poverty rate, neighborhoods that are aging, making sure we're taking care of people who need it, while investing in the continued growth of our city, we can be the best city in the country, the best urban city in the country.
Love that.
Got to have a vision. Vision is important.
What do you think is the most important difference between yourself and your opponent?
I only get one. It's probably like 3 or 4. I think the #1 is probably perspective. And I think, that perspective comes from really living in 2 different worlds. I believe that people can have empathy for individuals who are different, but I think having lived an experience prepares you in such a way and gives you a perspective that allows you to lead. So I grew up in poverty, right? That's no secret to anybody anymore, in extreme poverty. And I think that perspective is very important if you're going to lead a city where you have a significant number of people who have experienced that. I've also had the fortune of having a great education and also having a great profession and not being in poverty. And that's a perspective that I bring. And so I think the biggest distinction is that perspective, the ability to really be able to represent the whole of our city from an authentic place, to say, not only do I believe that these individuals need and can be helped, but I've been there. I've understood what it's like to not know where your next meal is coming from or not know where you're going to sleep that night. Been there. And that gives me, I think, a passion and an intensity and a focus that other people who haven't experienced that, including my challenger, can't understand. And I think we need a leader who really understands those 2 worlds and is prepared to bring them together. And I think that kind of leadership is important now, particularly because we're at a place where we've been growing and we haven't seen everyone come and benefit from that growth.
How will you increase minority involvement and empowerment, and what does minority empowerment look like to you?
Well, I think there's a few things. I think making sure that we've got voices at the table is always my first perspective, right? So you can't speak for people. You have to allow them to speak for themselves. We need to make sure that we've got diversity at our decision-making table at every level, from our communities to our administration, to our nonprofit stakeholders and partners. We've got to demand that we don't just talk about inclusion or diversity, and that we don't let it just exist on one plane, but that at every single table we have people who represent the diversity of our city, of our state, of our nation, of our world. And Cincinnati can do a lot better job. I sit at a lot of tables where I'm the only brown person. I sit at tables where I'm the only person wearing a skirt. And that's not acceptable. And so we've got to make sure that we hear from people who are different and allow them to help guide our city's future. And so once we do that, I think we'll see a city that more reflects the diversity of our community and the desires and needs of those communities in a real way. I think the challenge is we often try to speak for other people. I cannot begin to speak for men, cannot speak for a man, right? I cannot speak for a white man. I cannot speak for a white woman. So making sure that those voices are at every table is the only way we make sure we get an authentic voice for all those perspectives, and the list is long, right? We need to make sure that we've got inclusion in our workforce. We've got to make sure we've got inclusion in our contracting. We've got to make sure that we've got inclusion in our investments, meaning individuals who are a part of the future of our city, meaning investing financially in our city. And we've got a long way to go in that. And I think we need to be intentional about bringing people together. People spend most of their time at home, at their places of work, and their places of worship. And those are three places in this city where maybe work in some places, but those are three places where people are very much separated. We're one of the most segregated, so people don't live together to the same extent as other cities that we compare ourselves to. People worship still very separately in our city, which I think there's been some efforts, and I'm really enthusiastic about opportunities for different religions and different racial backgrounds, different churches of different racial backgrounds to kind of come together, maybe not permanently, but to fellowship and worship together. All good things. And also, like I said, at the business table, making sure that we've got people who are able to invest in business, invest in real estate, who are of different backgrounds.
So we have quite a few questions from the audience.
Good.
So I'll start asking.
We're 42 days from the election. I hope people have questions. I want to answer them all.
I hope people are kind of plugging in now, because I've been knocking doors for a few months, and a lot of people didn't know that there's an election, but there is. It's on November 7th.
It is
if you
November
live in
7th.
the city of Cincinnati, you'll be voting for your mayor and for your city council and a few other issues. And if you live outside the city, I'm sure that there's still issues on your ballot. So hopefully everybody's tuned into that.
And you can start voting in 15 days. Yes. Early vote starts in 15 days.
Do you feel like gentrification is an issue going on in our city, and how will you help in this city progression while keeping people from being displaced and left behind during that process? Gentrification
is an issue in this city and in every urban city, right? And so I think, one of the things we need to realize is that for the first time in a long time, cities are back. People want to move into cities. And I talked about the fact that for about half a century, almost, we had a population decline and people were leaving cities. So we didn't invest aggressively in our footprint. And then all of a sudden, cities become popular. We start investing again, people come. Well, the first dollar in is going to be that market rate dollar, right? Because I can come in and buy something up, put my money into it, and sell it or rent it for a very high cost. Because we didn't have a plan at the outset to make sure that we had funding and resources available to be able to make sure within communities that we have workforce housing and affordable housing, what's happening is we're seeing in some communities lots and lots of market rate housing coming in and displacing people. Some of that is in our control and some of it is not. I can't keep a private person from selling their building and somebody coming in and raising the rent. But what I can do is make sure that we're incenting a mix of options within communities so that in that same area we see housing, whether that's housing that is ownership housing, or rental housing that is diverse. I also think one of the things we can do in Cincinnati is to offer, in the home ownership space, a diversity of housing, right? People can own housing at $50,000, $60,000. I'm in love with the tiny home movement. I think we should have tiny homes in our city as well as options for millennials and individuals who have, you know, in the middle range, in the low to mid range, so that they can own homes. I'm a huge fan of renter equity, have been a supporter of that, co-op programs. We need more of that activating in communities, so we're not replacing, that we're supplementing. The strongest communities are integrated communities where people live together, and we don't want to replace. We want to make sure that we're creating communities that are diverse with a lot of different people from different backgrounds. And we have a couple great examples of those. I talk about Kennedy Heights and Pleasant Ridge a lot as communities that are intentionally integrated and diverse, but there are others too. And so as we rebuild our city, we have to make sure we do that with an eye towards making sure that we have resources to be able to incent and support affordable housing and workforce housing. Now, we've done it. We just haven't done it in a clip that's keeping pace with the market rate. As soon as we start to put money into a community, the market comes, buys everything up, and then we end up with one dimension, and we certainly need more than one.
So I'm reading this question verbatim, so I'm not the I is an audience member.
Okay.
Maybe I just haven't heard it yet, but do you include LGBT people as part of your plan for inclusion? So workplace protection, marriage equality?
Absolutely, and I have an excellent record on that. I've been proud of my record on LGBTQ issues, have been endorsed by the Equality Pact, every single race. We've done a lot in this city. Including being the first city in the state, probably, I don't know if we're in the nation, but in the state to ban conversion therapy. We've done a lot of work, not just on the legislative side, but the work that I do in combating human trafficking, and we've been able to support a lot of transgender individuals who have been trafficked, and LGBT individuals who've been trafficked as well. So we've got a stellar record on this. Cincinnati's come a long way from the days before Article 12, and I'm proud of our record. So yes, it does include individuals of all backgrounds.
So what do you agree with John Cranley on? While again, the I is an audience member, do support you in your bid for mayor. I want to know that your positions aren't just the opposite of him. Politics are divisive, and I would love a leader that can acknowledge good ideas in others, even if they are opponents.
So we have, when we've had issues that we agree on, I always stand with him. So the $15 an hour wage issue, we stood together on that. A lot of the LGBTQ issues we've stood together on for sure. I have been supportive of his inclusion program, I think, and we started that work before he became mayor, but certainly supportive of that. But we're different people. And so I think we have different priorities because of that perspective issue. And I'm proud of the fact that I advocate for issues that are important to me too. And so I don't believe that just because you don't agree all the time, that means that you're opposite. It just means that you're different leaders. So yeah, when he's, I certainly think that the program that he's done with the First Ladies for Health is a great initiative, one that I would certainly continue as mayor. And one of the things that people should know about me is that I'm not someone that would be naturally antagonistic. I speak my mind and the things that I believe, and certainly, of course, I'm inclusive in making sure I hear from people on that. But if I don't, I don't. And if I believe there's a better way, I'm going to suggest that too. That's just a part of leadership. So you don't go along to get along, and you're not divisive for the purpose of being divisive. You will not see, as we've seen with this mayor, me deciding I want to kill stuff just because the previous administration did it. We're not going to do that. If there's a good idea that's already been executed, we're going to keep those, because I believe in good ideas, and we should continue them. So yeah, I think there's several examples of things that he's done that I've been supportive of, and I've said that on the record.
Identify an issue that you feel is important where others are marginalized. What do you plan to do to help affect positive change in that situation?
There are so many, and I've worked on a lot of those. I mean, I'm really proud of my record of not only supporting, I think, the development of our city, Washington Park, Smale Park, Dunhumby deals, the deals that we've had in development, but also taking care of the least of these. And that includes homeless individuals, that includes young people who don't have a voice, that includes small businesses, that includes our neighborhoods in many instances. Talked about my work rescuing victims of sex trafficking and making sure that they have a way forward. That to me is the work that's closest to my heart. And that's the work that some people don't believe the government should be doing. But I think that we should. And we have to if we're going to be a great city. You can measure a great city by who has the most, but I measure a great city based on how those who are the least do. And so we can and we should do more. I'm proud of the fact that I led the effort to increase the Human Services Fund for the first time in years. We more than doubled that fund for safety net services, and we impacted almost 13,000 people because of that. And we did fight this administration on that. They did not support that effort. And so, well, at least not initially. And then in this most recent year, they did support our effort. So we have been intentional about every year bringing increased funding for those who need it the most. And then in our policies, making sure that we're advocating for people who need a voice.
In response to Cincinnati's sanctuary city designation, officials at the federal and state levels have threatened funding cuts or even holding city officials liable for any criminal acts committed by immigrants whose legal status is in question. How can we maintain local programs and to continue to stand up for immigrants if the federal government cuts various funds?
Well, a federal judge just said that that's illegal. So we just got a great determination. We don't believe that it's legal for the federal government to condition funds on adhering to a law that we don't believe we should have to adhere to. Sanctuary cities, the way that it's been introduced is I think, a way to try to get local law enforcement to do the job of the federal government. We're not required to do that. ICE can do whatever they feel like they need to do, and we can't restrict them. But I do not have to have my police officers doing the work for them, particularly when we have very limited resources for our officers already to do the work that they're charged with doing. I think it also sends a horrible message when our local law enforcement, who are supposed to keep everybody safe, are supposed to be hunting people down. And we're not going to do that. So I would say we would challenge it. We have challenged it. Other cities have successfully challenged it. We're going to make sure we do what's right by people, and we're not going to allow threats by anybody, particularly unfounded threats, to keep us from doing that work.
How will you make the lives of those living with poverty more sustainable and more productive? How will you advance opportunities to rise out of poverty?
So I've lived here, right? And I think, and we've done some research here too. What they say is the biggest determinant of your trajectory is where you live, the environment in which you live. And so we focus a lot on people, and that's very important. But if we want to make a big dent, particularly in generational poverty, which is something we're not talking about enough. We're talking about discrete poverty, talking about in any one year, are you in poverty? We're not talking about the fact that only 5% of our children will grow up to get out of poverty in a generation. 5%. I believe the best way to do that is to change the environment in which people live. So we got to hyper focus on place and making sure our neighborhoods are places where people can thrive. So our focus is on building up neighborhood capacity to be a village for our children and for the people who live there, to give them the tools to be able to support themselves and each other, and to make sure that we don't have institutions that are fostering more poverty, right? Which this is an institutional issue. So fair wages are a part of that. Unequal pay is a part of that. Lack of benefits are a part of that. Lack of transportation are all institutional contributors to generational poverty. And because we have a segregated city, we often find that services and resources are in certain places and not in certain places. And what I want us to do is to make sure that no matter where you live, you have the amenities you need to live your life. Quality housing, grocery stores and for access to fresh food, transit that can get you to and from work, and whatever services you need, right? I mean, making sure there's daycare near you, making sure that, and we can build that in a city. And we already have what are called centers of activity. There are places in our city where we have schools and churches and playgrounds and parks and, places for people to gather. But we also have to build up those neighborhoods and those places to be fully supportive, right? You shouldn't walk to one neighborhood in our city and feel like you can't get out of your car and go to another side of town and feel like you can get everything you need. Not fair. We as a city have to make sure we're building neighborhoods that are fully supportive. And we can also build capacity within communities. One example is our Mom Tourage that we're leaning into in, I know, right?
A Mom Tourage?
A Mom Tourage that we're leaning into in Winton Hills, right? The idea that we have a lot of single moms that are concentrated in one area. How do we give those moms the support they need to be supports to each other, right? Helping them build a schedule that says, mom number 1, pick up. Mom number 2, drop off. Mom number 3, on Wednesdays, gotta work. Moms, let's put together our resources. Let's make meals for all of us together. Let's walk together. Let's look out for each other. If you need help, I've got it. I grew up in a village, so we didn't have a whole lot, but we got through because you could go down the street and borrow a cup of sugar. Or if you needed help, they looked after your kids, you looked after theirs. There was a shared value system that we take care of each other, that we do the right thing, that we pick up behind ourselves, that we make sure that we have a community that is cared for. I believe we have to rebuild the village. And if we can rebuild the village, we call it wake up the village, time to wake the village, but really bring the village back. I think we can start building capacity in places where people live. I think we've started to concentrate away from where people live. Everybody lives their life out there and not where they live, which is where people spend a lot of their time. So if we build up neighborhoods to be better supports for people, then we'll see people advancing. We'll see them getting through just enough so that I can think about that next stage in life. People say she should get a job. Well, guess what? Her first option is taking care of her children. And if she gets a job and she can't get daycare, she's not going to be able to work. So how do we begin to make sure that we're building supports for that where she lives? Because if I got to get the daycare is on the bus line this way, work is on the way this way, I just spent 2 hours, 3 hours on a bus to drop off a child and get to work. That's each way. There are people who are living in that condition. So I think we've got to build our city up to be a place where our neighborhoods are places where people can thrive and do well.
Yeah, and imagine missing that bus too. So
oh my gosh.
That kind of leads
Heaven
into
forbid.
Another question from the audience. Mm-hmm. I'm sure there will be some follow-up questions because this seems to be a hot topic issue. Mm-hmm. Do you have a vision for mass transportation?
I do, and it's a big, bold vision, right? It's the idea that, so we have a concept called 20-minute cities, rebuilding our city to be a place where you can get anywhere you need to get within 20 minutes by walk, transit, or car. And also making sure that our transit system is one that doesn't require people to drive to take more than 30 minutes to get where they need to go for work. And so that means that we've got to invest in making sure that we have more direct routes from our city to those employment centers that are outside of the city where a lot of people work. We've got to make sure we've got crosstown routes so that people can get across town without the hub and spoke model that requires them to go downtown, transfer, and come back out. And that means that we've got to do a study. So I'm asking SORTA to do a study like Columbus did of our routes to see if they're currently serving people. Columbus was able to do a route study, reorganize their routes, and they were able to serve 100,000 more people just by reorganizing their route. They didn't spend another dollar in operations. Now, we will likely have to spend another dollar in operations if we want a best-in-class transit system. But at least we know we'll have a foundation that is the best route system that we can have, and we're not there yet. And then I want us to make sure that we're investing in lots of different multimodal options. And that includes bus rapid transit, that includes rail, that includes bus, that includes bike lane. That way people have many options to be able to get around no matter where they live and where they're going. And so I think if we can do that, I think we'll go a long way. It's going to cost some money, for sure. I think that there are resources that we haven't tapped into, grants and other things for the physical infrastructure that'll need to be built out. And then, of course, operationally, we'll spend some money. But the idea is transportation is the great equalizer right now. And people call it the civil rights issue of our time because it really does, I think, divide the haves and the have-nots. If you don't have access to transit, then you can't live anymore just because it's impossible to get where you need to go. So I believe in a bold vision for transit, and I'm supporting, along with, I think, the Chamber and others, making sure that if we're only going to get one real shot to do this, that we do it the right way.
So we have another question from the audience here.
Mm-hmm.
The tech industry is growing at an amazing rate.
Mm-hmm.
UC recently partnered with CPS to promote tech in high schools and younger. What are you going to do to promote the tech industry for women and minorities in Cincinnati? And what is our city going to do to bring more tech companies to our area?
So I've been very supportive of not just the traditional centrifuge and others, but we just recently supported, at my insistence, a group called the Hillman Accelerator, and their focus is specifically on getting more women and minorities in tech. And so we're excited. They were also funded by the state. They are, Dahani Jones, who is a former Bengals player and small business owner here, started that initiative, and we gave them $100,000 in the budget and seed funding to do their work. I think they got a grant from the state as well that was more than twice that, and we're going to continue to support their effort. I'm also a huge fan of, our school district, making sure that we have more tech, right? So I live in the West End, really excited about Hayes Porter being a high-tech elementary school. Taft, of course, is our IT high school, and more education, more tech education is very, very important, not just for startups, but to put people in a place to be trained for those jobs. I've also been advancing the redevelopment of Queensgate as a advanced tech, green tech manufacturing hub, and hoping that we can get resources to be able to redevelop it that way so we have those jobs right here. Our kids can go and touch them. And guess what? They will feed lots of new tech startups as a result of that, that investment as well.
How would you react to the protests that went on in Charlottesville if they happened here in Cincinnati? And how does that statement, there were good people on both sides, resonate with you?
So we stand with Charlottesville. I actually just met with the mayor of Charlottesville in D.C. last week and told him that up close and personal. It's just a challenge. I would say that I'm shocked by it. I'm not. I believe that racism exists. I believe it exists in places that people don't want to talk about. I believe the less that we talk about it, the more that it continues to grow, maybe under our noses, and we can't quite see it. The city of Cincinnati would be prepared. I want us to be prepared and have urged our administration to be prepared for the fact that it could happen in Cincinnati. I want to make sure we're protecting our citizens from outside forces that would seek to bring that hate in our community. And we need to make sure we're clear on which side we're on. Right? We're on the side of justice, and we're on the side of equality, and we're on the side of making sure that there is no hate and that there is love. And I would never confuse the two. And we should never, ever confuse the two. I have been known to protest and to stand when I need to as a citizen and as a leader. It is my right to march with people who are denouncing hate and promoting love and equality and justice. And so you would probably see me not only making sure our administration is keeping everybody safe, but you would probably see me right there with everybody else.
So switching gears, going back to some of the questions that we had already planned out, we have one of the highest childhood poverty rates in the country. What is being done to change the situation, and what more will you do?
So we commissioned an amazing study called the Youth Commission Study. That study is actually being referenced now by the Mayor's Child Poverty Collaborative, so they're using it as a reference. It was a partnership with several organizations, Children's Hospital, Strive Partnership, United Way, and 20 other agencies. We also had some outside funding from amazing foundations like Interact for Health and the Fifth Third Foundation, and the Women's Fund. And I think GCF put money in too, Greater Cincinnati Foundation. And that study looks at and understands at its very foundation that poverty doesn't happen in a vacuum, right? So we've got to stop isolating poverty. People can be poor and still live and be productive. But what we know is that poverty, when we talk about income level, is often interconnected with lack of health care, lack of a job, lack of education, lack of quality housing. And those were things that and then being in an area where crime is and safety is a question. And so our study, imagine the child in a web, caught in a web, and our study says that even if you isolate one area, you're not going to get that child out, not for a lifetime. You're not going to break the cycle of generational poverty, which is what I care about. Because if somebody can be poor one year, be outside the poverty level the next year, lose that job, and be back in poverty the next day. Right? We're talking about people being in a place where they won't return to poverty, and that their children won't be in poverty. So what it says is that really you need to isolate and fix at least 3 of the 6 if you want kids to be able to walk through it. Here's the challenge. Our kids living in poverty, based on our research, are mostly dealing with 4 or more. So that means even if they have a quality education, Preschool Promise is a good example, they're still going to get stuck in the web, because if they aren't stabilized in the other 5, because they won't show up ready to learn if they don't have quality health care, if they didn't eat last night, if they're worried about where they're going to sleep. And so we've got to find a way to deal with more than one issue at a time. We've got to be, and that requires our organizations to partner together to make sure that they are working to stabilize more than one. Like I said, we've got to make sure our neighborhoods are places that can be supportive. So the resources need to be where people live. Because if I'm spending my time trucking to your office between the hours of 8 and 5 to have a meeting with you to get your services, that probably means that I have transportation, I have a job that lets me off, and I have daycare. If I have those 3 things, I'm not your most mission critical person. The most mission critical people are the people who never show up at your door. But we know where they live. So how do we get resources out of buildings and into communities? And how do we get our organizations working cooperatively to isolate 3 or 4 of these things so we can get kids out of this web and get families out of the web? So the work that we've done and the study that we've done, we've partnered, CPS was one of our partners, and they've already adopted our recommendations. Police Department, the Recreation Center has also. We're starting in 9 neighborhoods, because 51% of our kids live in 9 neighborhoods. Believe it or not, our kids are concentrated in certain neighborhoods. And we've gotten the commitment of those 9 neighborhoods to work in conjunction with us to identify the major challenges and gaps in their neighborhoods, and for us to identify capacity building opportunities within those neighborhoods to better support our kids. And so that's the work that we're doing. We're really excited about it. We're going to continue that work. We are excited about the recommendations that we believe are forthcoming from the Child Poverty Collaborative as well. And I think those 2 movements together are going to be remarkable, because they have a lot of financial resources that they're going to bring to bear as well. And if we can put those together and make sure those resources are being used in community, and that the voices that they're listening to are the voices of the people in poverty, I think we're going to find a win-win between those 2 movements, for sure.
Sounds like the village is waking up.
The village is waking up.
So this is a longer question, so bear with me.
Mm-hmm.
If Planned Parenthood is blocked from participating in the Medicaid program at the federal and/or state level, what will you do at the local level to make sure that essential preventative health services like birth control, STI testing, and Pap tests are available at Planned Parenthood for the people who need them most?
We will make sure that they are supported, the organization. We will support them. The work that they do is mission critical. We've seen major reductions in our teen pregnancy rates because of the work of Planned Parenthood. We know that, we had majorly high rates of STD infection. Those numbers have stabilized quite a bit. We don't have the capacity within our own footprint to be able to do the work that Planned Parenthood does. And frankly, the anonymity that Planned Parenthood provides is something that people desire and have the right to have. And so Planned Parenthood is essential. You may recall that a few years back, 2 of our clinics were in danger of being closed. Myself and several other important leaders like Sherrod Brown stood up and held rallies and protested the closure of those clinics. And we were successful with the judge in keeping those open. So I stand with Planned Parenthood 100%. And we will make sure that they have the resources they need to serve, let me be clear, to serve our citizens. They're our citizens. And we're grateful for the work that they do, because without it, we just wouldn't be able to serve those women and girls.
Mayors can leverage the credibility of their office to run for state or federal seats. As a state or federal legislator, would you have the ability to vote on abortion laws, or you would have the ability to vote on abortion laws? What is your stance on legal abortion access as allowed under Roe v. Wade?
I am 100% pro-choice. I believe it's a woman's right to choose, and I don't believe in restrictions on that right. So I don't even know why we still talk about it. It is a constitutional right. And I know that there have been recent efforts. We had a recent effort in our state house. I'm very disappointed to reduce the amount of time that women have to be able to make that choice. And it's a challenging choice for women to make. And it's one that I believe most women take very seriously, and it's very deliberative. And it's a challenging choice. I don't know where we got to the place where people thought that this was just something that somebody would just do after work one day. It's a really challenging choice. And we should respect that, and we should, we should give women the time and opportunity that they need to do that. And there are so many women who actually it's not really a choice for them at all. Women who have been raped, women who didn't learn of their pregnancy until later, women who, if they brought their child to term, it would be a danger to their life or the life of the child. Those are really mission critical too, but absolutely women regardless under the law, and I would always protect that right for them to choose.
And if we know anything about people, it's they're going to do what they want to do, so let's help them do it safely.
Well, there was a time in our country where people did this the wrong way, and we lost a lot of people. A lot of women died before Roe versus Wade was passed, and we don't want that. We're a civilized country. We shouldn't do that.
How are you going to improve relationships between the police and everyone in the community, especially minorities?
Well, one of the great things we were able to do, part of that is just bringing people together, right? So when we did our youth summit, we do an annual youth summit, about 500 kids every year for the last 5 years. And we had what's called a fishbowl exercise where we had our kids in the center and they got to talk about what they feel about the police department. And then we had the police officers get in the center and they got to talk about their feelings about young people in our community. And then we mixed up the fishbowl and we had them mixed together. And what we heard, we didn't, of course, videotape it or allow the press because it was a very kind of private thing. And what we heard was just amazing. We were able to break down the barriers because kids were able to say to police officers, here's what you think of me and I'm not who you think I am. And officers were able to say, here's why I feel this way. And I think it was a level of understanding that I've never seen before. We did a survey at the end, text message kids, where we asked them whether, based on that one fishbowl exercise, whether they had an improved, belief about police officers, that whether they improved their perception of police officers. 85% of our kids said yes, just in that one exchange. And our police officers were changed by that experience. It was interesting to watch them listen, to sit there and listen to kids say, I'm not a criminal. Don't judge me. I'm just having fun. You're supposed to protect me, not berate me. Don't arrest me. Don't abuse me. And to see our officers just sit there and hear that. This is what I believe you think of me. And for our officers to say, I have children too. I understand. I'm sorry that I'm judging you. We don't mean to. This is what we do. We will do better. It was really very interesting. It was one of the most groundbreaking and kind of emotional experiences I've ever had. And I was walking around and I thought, this is it. When we give the opportunity for people to come together from different backgrounds and hear each other, really hear each other, it can be so impactful. And unfortunately, because we don't live together, we don't get the chance to get to know each other. So I would want to facilitate more of those exchanges. These exchanges where we can just be honest and say, what are our perceptions and why is it not true? How do we break down those barriers? I want our officers to spend more time on the ground in communities. I want to empower them to do that. I want to encourage them to do that. And they don't live there, but I want them to treat it like they do. When you feel ownership over a place, you treat it very differently when you don't. And I think a lot can be learned just by spending time and getting to know people. And that engagement shouldn't happen only when you're coming in to ask whether a crime was committed or to arrest someone. If the only time you see police in your community is when something bad happens, you're going to think that the police don't care about you. And they do. Their job is to protect you. So I think we have amazing officers. I believe that if we gave them the opportunity and encouraged them to do this, that they would. I think their level of understanding would grow. I think the level of trust that our community has with officers would grow tremendously. And I think we'd have much better police community relations as a result of it. So we've got to facilitate more of that engagement. As mayor, I would create opportunities for us to do that, for sure.
So we have another question from our audience here.
Okay.
Can you comment on why you asked Children's Hospital for an additional $14 million and what appeared to be a last-minute move?
So first, let me just be clear about a couple things. I 100% support Children's Hospital, I always have. I talked about the partnership that we have with them on the Youth Commission. They were great partners. We worked together to complete Burnham Manor, which is their office building, just a couple years ago, and I helped find $10 million for them to complete that project. Some of it did come from the community of Avondale. in their TIF. So we have a great relationship. So my recommendation was founded on that relationship, right? The idea that we have a great positive relationship, and can we do more in this community that you're expanding in? Children's owns not just the houses that they're demolishing for the expansion, but they own a ton of homes going all the way up to Northern, which is 2 blocks outside the expansion footprint. They didn't have plans for that housing. They don't know what they're going to do with it. And in my earlier conversations, I talked to them about not tearing that housing down and not leaving it vacant, but redeveloping that housing. If the houses can be saved, let's redevelop them. If they have to be torn down, let's replace them. Because what we know is that in communities, no matter whether it's Avondale or Hyde Park, vacancy brings blight and it brings crime, right? We don't want that outside of the children's footprint. We don't want that in communities where people live like in Avondale. So the proposal was based on earlier conversations. I had not put a number to it, so that's correct. The $14 million was a last-minute request. It was my only opportunity to formally make a request once the vote came before us, and I have to do that in a motion, and that's why I did it that way. It was $1.4 million a year for 10 years. The construction will be 4 years, so 6 years after the construction is completed, we would continue to be investing. It is not going to be enough. The city of Cincinnati would have to invest as well in this housing that Children's owns. But I wanted to make it very clear to them, I want to see that housing restored, and it's housing that they own, and I want them to invest in it. So lesson number 1, don't do visionary, aggressive things in an election year, because if I had made that same request the year before, it would not have been handled the way it was. 2, I probably should have taken a little bit more time to talk about the numbers, the dollars and the cents. But remember, I have a relationship with children, so I didn't, and we had a conversation about this housing strategy before, so I didn't expect them to reject it. I actually thought that they would think it was a good idea. It's not enough they probably own, I can't count the number of houses, 60, maybe 70 in that footprint. So to restore and rebuild that many houses, the city would have to put a lot into. So we would say, you own the house, put some money into it, we put some money into it, and we can rebuild. If we don't do that, which, my proposal will be for the city to go ahead and put our money forth, if Children's would be willing to hopefully let us either transfer the housing to Port Authority or whatever. We have to have more conversations about it. If they're amenable to it, if they're not, we'll see what happens. But we have to do something there, because if we don't, we're going to have vacancy there, we're going to have blight there, we're going to have crime there, and we don't want to wait until someone gets hurt, right? We often do that. We react. I'm a proactive person, and I can say that if you have a big, expansive hospital and right outside the doors you have a bunch of vacancy, blight and crime, somebody's going to get hurt, and then we're going to say, why didn't we do something sooner? So we'll see. I think my investment is making sure that we have these tough conversations where we say to these stakeholders who I think give a lot, can we do a little bit more? Is there a way for us to make sure that the areas in which we inhabit are places that people will want to live in that are safe? But an election year is tough, and we took a hit on that because we were bold enough to say, hey, can we do more here? But I think it's in the best interest of both the community and Children's to do it. If I could do it differently, I probably would have either not included a specific dollar amount in the proposal, but just said, let's make sure that we have some critical conversations, or I would have brought the dollar amount up in some of the earlier conversations. Note that it was not going to be enough. The city was going to have to put dollars in it anyway, so, it was just what we thought was kind of a small piece of a bigger puzzle that could really redevelop the footprint. For people to have an example, and Cleveland Clinic is an example of where they did it exactly wrong, and that area around the clinic is a real problem. It's one of the least safe places, and people don't go outside of that building much because of it. The Bronx Hospital is an example of where they did it really well, and they did invest in the footprint around the hospital, and it's a thriving community where people come and go. People who work at the hospital live in the community with their neighbors and people who are patients at the hospital. And that's the kind of environment that we're trying to create. And we, we'll have to see whether the city can make it happen. And I think, the city will make the investment if we need to, because we just can't let the area continue to go.
Thank you. What would you do to address traffic safety? I, meaning an audience member, see surrounding cities with better traffic systems, safer pedestrian crossings. So what would you do to make this safer in our city?
So we have a kind of one of our big strategies is Vision Zero. And Vision Zero is a program that was adopted from Europe. It's basically, so Vision Zero cities, to give you the punchline, are cities where they've seen a 50% reduction in vehicular pedestrian fatalities as a result of the strategies that they've implemented. So what they do is they take technology, engineering, and community engagement to identify challenges with pedestrians, bikes, and cars. They use technology and engineering to come up with a specific solution for that corridor, right? Every corridor is not created equal. So we're supporting in Northside, where there was a recent fatality, a roundabout. At that a roundabout. At that particular intersection, it is the best strategy because you've got a 5-point area that's coming together, which is already very dangerous. And you're coming off of a very fast intersection and you're going into a slow intersection, so people don't slow down. They speed straight through the community where people are walking. In some communities that might look like lighting strips, so you push the button, lighting strips, you walk, cars, the light changes, cars see a red light. If they didn't see the red light, they see the lighting strip, and then the person walks. In areas where you got a quick turn before a light, we might move that light, right? So that right off the turn, you don't see a light stopped. We might have to move it back. We might adjust it. We might do a blinking light ahead of the red light, better signage. So what Vision Zero does is they take these three things, and I think you need all three. You need engineering, you need technology, and you need community engagement at an intersection by intersection approach to make sure that we're slowing down that traffic, that we're righting the relationship between the pedestrian and the vehicle, because the pedestrian is king at all times, and make sure we create streets that are safer for people. And that means that we've got to slow those vehicles down. It also means that we need more aware pedestrians. So we might need some additional signage as well for pedestrians as they walk into intersections. Push a button, hey there, look up, stop, because we're doing this too. So yeah. I think it's just a perfect storm of vehicles that are much more aggressive and people who are distracted.
So we have less than 10 minutes left of this interview.
Are you serious? That went fast.
I know. If you have any questions, if you're sitting in the audience with any questions, make sure you include those questions in the comments and we'll get them answered. And are you and your team comfortable with, if we don't get to all the questions in the thread, answering them directly on Facebook? We can be tagging people.
I think we've got that. We've got the capacity.
Okay.
Chaka's ready.
Today, but we'll get it done.
Okay, cool. Yep. So your questions will get answered even if I don't relay them live today. So what input does the city get in large transportation projects that affect the city but that have countrywide or interstate aspects, such as the proposed Brent Spence Bridge replacement? Are there any projects like these upcoming that we aren't familiar with?
So we do get the opportunity to weigh in, and we often are pushing against those regulatory agencies at the state and federal level to get more community engagement. So I-71 MLK Interchange, which is a project that I was involved in. The Kennedy Connector, another project I was involved in. The Red Bank Corridor project and connector was another project. And we are often just fighting with the state and the federal government to say, we need to hear from citizens on this. You need to take our input. And we have to do that at the early stages, because what they'll say is, well, we're conditioning our support on doing it this way. We were very shocked and surprised and disappointed by what happened with the I-71 MLK interchange, because we were not told, and in fact we were very strong about the fact that we did not want 10 lanes going across the MLK corridor without some sort of bike lanes, some sort of median to make sure that we're allowing people to cross safely. And when that came back, when we were kind of almost we had finished the planning, and when it came back ready for construction, we were told that those were not going to be included in the plan. How disappointing was that? So now we've got to find a way to work as a city to help get the resources to build that back in, right? Because you can't have 10 lanes going across a city street and expect people to be able to walk across it safely. So with the Kennedy, I'm sorry, not the Kennedy Connector, but with the Madisonville Red Bank corridor, we had many community engagement opportunities, and we did. The community came out, we encouraged more and more, and we were able to win that in part, right? They wanted to speed that traffic up really, really fast in order to get people to 71 faster. But it's a neighborhood, so we were fighting to keep that traffic as slow as possible through there. They wanted to turn it into the Red Bank Expressway. We wanted the Red Bank Parkway. And so our job in those projects is to make sure we're the voice of our citizens, to say we need to be at the table. We need to make sure we have pedestrian-friendly, amenities, and make sure that the pedestrian can get through. We don't have final say on it. Often our only kind of walk away is just to walk away, to say we're not going to do the project if you don't allow community engagement. The Brent Spence project has been through many iterations. We've seen lots of different ideas, a double-decker idea, many different ideas. We don't own that bridge. Kentucky owns it, so we would kind of be an ancillary partner. Same with the Western Hills Viaduct. That's owned by the county, but of course we would be at the table on that. And we've already started to think about and talk about bike lanes and bike infrastructure and pedestrian infrastructure on the Western Hills Viaduct. We have a lot more control when it's more local. A lot less when it's state and federal. But it is our job, and we do a great job of encouraging community engagement in those projects.
So this is a great question to end on. What issues have you spearheaded on council that you're most proud of?
It's tough to pick just one. Most of my work is just it's so emotional. Most of it. I mean, we do work in rebuilding neighborhoods. We do work in small business. We support, of course, development throughout our city. But a lot of my work is really heartbreaking. The work that we do in human trafficking, for me, is very meaningful work. And I'm really proud of that work. We came upon that work because the community reached out to us, and we showed up at a meeting, and all of a sudden that became our work, because we realized how important it was to have a leadership voice on this issue. We realized how pervasive the issue is. Our state is 5th in the nation for sex trafficking and labor trafficking. The average age of entry into sex trafficking is 12 in our country and in our city. We believe that 90% or more of people who are on the streets engaging in sex trafficking are under the control of someone. It's just heartbreaking work. We go into places, into woods, behind buildings, into alleys, and we see things that would be heartbreaking to you. We know that there are children who are being trafficked, and we do everything in our power to rescue those children, but sometimes we don't get to. Sometimes we don't get it. And so it has just been some of the most meaningful work, because when we get it right, and it's not just my work. There's so many people engaged in this work. Police officers and social service agencies and judges and lawyers, all rowing in the same direction to say that we need to make sure we're combating this. When we get it right, we change lives in a real way. And when I go to the Off the Streets graduations or other graduations, and people talk about getting their life back. One woman was 32.
Chills.
I know. One woman was 32 years old when she graduated. She was 16 when she was brought into trafficking. And she noted that she had spent as much of her time living in trafficking as she had out. And that this 32 was important to make sure that that was the case. 32. I got in at 16, and this is it. I'm changing my life. And it's just so inspirational to meet a woman who was rescued and got out of the life, who was her mother was trafficked and her grandmother was trafficked. This was something that was a part of her family line, and she had daughters, and she said, "Not my daughters, the chain stops with me." Just how bold that was for her to take that stand for her daughters and to get better for her kids. It's really, people don't think that this happens, and it's amazing that this happens in our city so pervasively, and that we have people who are brought here for trafficking, not just internationally, but people who were brought here from across our country. And we had a girl from Mississippi who was brought here and trafficked at 19, who we got her home. Our police officers worked really hard and were able to get her home, back to her family. That is meaningful work. All the work we do, getting people who are homeless jobs, getting our kids off to the right start and making sure they feel loved. Very, very important work. It's meaningful work, and I'm very, very proud of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yvette Simpson is running for Cincinnati City Council. Elections are on November 7th. If you would like to know more about Yvette. Mayor. I'm so sorry. We've had so many city councils.
Oh, I've been there, done that.
Mayor. She's currently a city councilwoman.
Big ups to all the council candidates. Love you. But I'm running for mayor. Can't wait to work with you.
If you'd like to know more about Yvette, check out her website, YvetteSimpson.com. It's Yvette with a Y. And also her Twitter account, Yvette4Cincy. It's the number 4, Cincy with a Y. And then we can post links for those in the comments thread of this. So thank you for being here. Thank you for
having me. This was a wonderful interview. I want to thank all the organizations that had everything to do with this. We love your voice, and we thank you for allowing us to have a platform to speak. And everybody who listened.
Yeah. Thank you.